You have been told your entire life that human grief is a profound miracle. You think that complex existential mourning is a heavy burden only humans must carry. You believe that the cold, natural animal kingdom is completely blind to finality. You strongly assume our massive intelligence makes our emotional depth the absolute biological pinnacle. You wrongly believe wild animals completely ignore the terrifying permanence of physical death. But the terrifying, heartbreaking truth is much more unsettling and completely beautifully mind-bending. Look closely at the incredibly violent, highly dangerous natural world living wildly around you. The absolute humbling truth is that wild animals actively hold quiet funerals naturally. Your deep ability to understand the terrifying permanence of death is not unique. It is an ancient, deeply embedded evolutionary mechanism tied directly to profound social sentience. You weep quietly over the cold grave of a lost, deeply beloved friend. Animals do the exact same thing in the darkest corners of the deep wild. This is absolutely not a beautiful romantic theory or a silly emotional cartoon myth. It is a strictly documented, deeply studied, and scientifically proven ancient biological reality. Scientists correctly and accurately call this deeply fascinating field comparative evolutionary thanatology. They have recently discovered something completely mind-blowing about wild animal psychological awareness. Animals are absolutely not just mindless biological machines that simply ignore a fallen companion. They are highly emotional creatures that actively recognize and process the terrifying end. Let us safely dive into the incredibly small, fast-paced, highly intelligent world of corvids. Consider the dark, highly social, and incredibly observant ancient wild European magpie. For a very long time, arrogant scientists completely incorrectly assumed birds ignored their dead. We falsely assumed they just blindly flew away from a corpse without complex thought. We wrongly thought they reacted purely on basic survival instinct to gather bloody meat. But brilliant behavioral ecologists studying wild magpies carefully discovered something absolutely incredible and shocking. When a highly intelligent wild magpie discovers the dead body of another magpie, it completely absolutely does not just casually fly away or aggressively steal remaining food. The tiny bird's incredibly complex mind is highly sensitive to the terrifying visual loss. The alert magpie will immediately begin to call out loudly to the entire flock. A large group of highly intelligent birds will quickly gather quietly around the body. They will boldly stand in complete, eerie silence, carefully observing the completely fallen bird. Then, incredibly beautifully, some of the magpies will slowly, safely, cleanly fly away. They will gracefully return, carrying long, carefully selected pieces of fresh, dry grass. They will gently and carefully lay the grass directly beside the dead bird's body. They are literally laying down completely natural wreaths in a quiet, solemn avian funeral. They are highly intelligent enough to deeply realize their complex flock suffered massive loss. This completely shatters the deeply arrogant idea that simple birds are blind to mortality. The beautiful magpie is actively experiencing a completely genuine, highly respectful moment of grief. They actively choose to perfectly honor the terrifying, completely heavy loss of a companion. They safely, securely, beautifully, actively, perfectly experience completely undeniable, massive emotional social despair. But wild birds are absolutely not the only highly complex animals that exhibit mourning. Let us safely move from the bright, sunny meadow to the hot African savanna. Look closely at the incredibly massive, highly emotional, and deeply sensitive wild elephant herd. Wildlife biologists have carefully studied the incredibly complex social behavior of these massive mammals. They brilliantly discovered that elephants possess a massive, profound obsession with physical remains. In the incredibly limited human mind, we lazily assume animals only care about meat. We falsely assume predators entirely ignore ancient dry bones. But when scientists carefully study the massive, complex roaming patterns of the African elephant, they deeply discover that elephants actively seek out the dry bones of their ancestors. If a massive wild herd of elephants walks past the dry skull of another, they completely, absolutely do not just blindly, smoothly, quietly, gracefully walk past the bones. They never quickly treat the massive ivory tusks like normal white rocks. The entire massive, highly protective herd will immediately, respectfully stop exactly where they stand. They will slowly, respectfully, and quietly approach the incredibly massive, dry, bleached bones. They will actively use their highly sensitive trunks to gently and carefully caress them. They will specifically run their heavy, powerful trunks along the exact shape of faces. They will stand in complete, solemn, quiet silence for hours, gently touching the ivory, even if the elephant has been completely dead for decades. They absolutely actively remember. This massive social behavior requires a huge amount of raw biological memory and empathy. The elephant is actively mourning the permanent loss of a deeply beloved family member. It perfectly actively uses this incredible emotional ritual to process the terrifying empty world. This amazing study scientifically proves that understanding death is a deeply primal cognitive function. It is absolutely not a soft, unchanging emotional painting created for human observers. It is a wildly chaotic, completely terrifying ancient biological drive to completely process loss. The dark, terrifying shadows of the African night completely surround the grieving elephant herds. Without incredible, profound, deep, intense mutual trust, the entire herd would quickly perish alone. The sharp, powerful teeth of the waiting physical predators quickly, violently tear through darkness. The loud, violent, aggressive reality of death completely breaks the terrifying biological, natural silence. This completely terrifying realization brings us directly back to the highly dangerous African jungle. Consider our closest genetic relatives, the highly emotional and incredibly intelligent wild chimpanzee troops. Primatologists have carefully studied the incredibly complex emotional reactions of chimpanzees to violent death. They brilliantly discovered that a chimpanzee mother perfectly experiences absolutely massive, catastrophic psychological breaks when a young, beloved baby chimpanzee tragically dies from a sudden, violent attack. The massive mother absolutely does not simply continue foraging for fruit. She experiences overwhelming pure emotional denial. The massive grieving mother will violently refuse to drop the cold infant. She will stubbornly, forcefully carry the dead baby tightly against her chest for weeks. She will gently groom the incredibly beautiful lifeless fur and swat away buzzing flies. She will fiercely protect the body. She bravely protects the heavy dead infant from any aggressive apes perfectly. She is actively choosing to physically suffer the massive, heavy biological burden. She firmly refuses to carefully accept horrible truth. She is heavily weighed down by the terrifying, crushing reality of losing a child. This acts exactly like a deeply traumatized, totally broken human mother refusing terrible loss. The brilliant chimpanzees literally deeply understand the complex, terrifying concept of an empty void. They completely, deeply possess the massive emotional capacity to completely shatter. Existential heavy grief is absolutely not just a random quirk of overheated mammalian brains. It is a highly profound, biological way of trying to safely process terrifying universes. It is a strictly ancient biological way of violently screaming into voids. When the terrifying physical emotional pain is simply entirely too massive to bear. But the incredible, dark depth of this ancient connection completely incredibly goes even deeper. We must carefully, critically examine the terrifying evolutionary purpose of this crushing emotional dependency. Why would brutal biology create such an incredibly massive, potentially fatal, beautiful emotional vulnerability? If absolute natural selection purely strongly favors the strong, why allow heavy animal mourning? Why does the brilliant, massive wild chimpanzee risk absolute starvation to safely, fiercely grieve? Why does the highly intelligent captive elephant brilliantly remember dead ivory bones? The shocking biological answer completely radically redefines our deeply held beliefs about social survival. Deep existential grief is the terrible, beautiful biological price we completely pay for attachment. To safely, perfectly form incredibly strong, highly resilient, protective families, you need powerful glue. You desperately, biologically, need an intensely powerful, colorful emotion to perfectly clearly bind tribes. That incredibly ancient, highly powerful, deeply profound biological social glue is exactly what love. Love strictly ensures that a fierce friend perfectly violently protects a completely vulnerable ally. It beautifully ensures that a massive, noisy alliance stays perfectly, safely grouped tightly together. But this incredible biological, emotional, social superpower deeply comes with a massive, dangerous vulnerability. If beautiful, powerful love completely strongly binds the mind together, absolute death rips it. You completely biologically cannot easily have bright, beautiful friendship without completely risking the heavy, the intense psychological, overwhelming, crushing pain of heavy loss is the absolute mirror love. It is the dark, incredibly heavy, massive shadow cast by deep emotional cooperative connection. Without this terrifying emotional shadow, the ancient survival bonds would be completely incredibly weak. This brings us to the most incredible, highly profound compassion pivot perfectly clearly today. So why exactly does any of this actually profoundly matter to your daily life? Why should you ever really care if a wild magpie holds a quiet funeral because it utterly shatters the arrogant illusion of human superiority? You have strongly always falsely believed that your complex human mourning makes you invincible. You wrongly thought you're amazing. Deep ability to feel existential human terror was unique. You wrongly arrogantly assumed your profound clinical social grief isolated you from basic animals. But wild, brilliant, deeply sensitive nature has actively experienced psychological social pain for millions. Long completely beautifully before early ancient humans ever perfectly buried friends in dark caves. Beautiful, majestic birds were quietly holding grassy funerals in bright, sunny meadows. Massive, beautiful elephants were desperately caressing heavy, bleached, dry bones on dusty savannas. Animals were actively carrying dead children through dark, thick jungles. Your specific, highly medicalized, incredibly deep human capacity for severe clinical heavy grief old. It is completely biologically just the very latest evolutionary version of beautiful social survival. You are absolutely not perfectly above the wild, incredibly mysterious, highly emotional, colorful world. You are deeply, tragically, perfectly, and beautifully fully entangled within its ancient social psychological. Your intense, overwhelming biological desire to completely rapidly, clearly protect your loved one's instinct, your desperate, primal biological need to rapidly mourn, the amazing, profound biological ability to perfectly feel crushing, clinical, beautiful grief is weakness. It is absolutely perfectly not a shameful, broken defect in your incredibly massive biology. It is the ultimate beautiful biological proof that you are completely capable of connection. To accurately feel the terrifying social weight, you must absolutely first deeply possess the incredible, beautiful capacity to love. Grief is the terrible, beautiful, massive biological price for the ancient, profound gift empathy. The very next time you closely, safely feel the dark, heavy, massive, lonely cloud, do not just aggressively, rigidly fight the simple despair rushing violently through your mind. Do not just critically think about the stressful, isolating human systems that created loneliness. Listen closely to the massive, incredible ancient evolutionary history echoing directly inside your bonds. Think carefully about the terrified wild elephant and the brilliantly mourning, hungry jungle chimpanzee. Listen quietly to the ancient, profound primal biological need for deep protective social connections. We are biologically all just extremely small, incredibly scared animals, quietly surviving. Very bravely. We are bravely trying to survive a completely beautiful, utterly terrifying, and heartbreaking world. Grief is absolutely not the ultimate final proof of our completely broken modern psychology. It is the incredibly ultimate beautiful biological proof that we truly care deeply, intimately. We powerfully share this massive, totally unavoidable emotional burden entirely with the wild animals. We deeply share our most profound, crushing social vulnerabilities with the fragile bird flocks. We are deeply united by our shared, incredible, massive capacity for devastating physical loss. We are completely, beautifully, intimately bound together by the terrifying, heavy cost of love. This is the true, deeply biological, completely fundamental reality of our terrifying modern universe. Every single tear shed is an ancient testament to absolute, overwhelming, brightly beautiful empathy. We literally cannot smoothly survive the completely freezing visual darkness alone in the wild if this terrifying, beautifully wild emotional truth deeply resonates with your own modern sentience. Please make sure to bravely, carefully leave a like and permanently subscribe. Right today, join our rapidly, powerfully growing, deeply thoughtful community of incredibly compassionate, deep modern thinkers. Please carefully, successfully share your own deeply emotional experiences with animal grief and death. Tell us exactly how you strongly, powerfully, completely, confidently protect your own close tribes. Thank you for bravely taking the time to completely, deeply, strictly, beautifully watch and deeply, gracefully, profoundly, beautifully, heavily, strictly, perfectly embrace the terrible beauty of empathy. The terrifying dark shadow of physical death deeply impacts every living creature. Every species desperately physically struggles to perfectly understand the massive final void. The harsh wild environment demands incredibly intense, deep focus just to survive. But even amidst pure, terrifying danger, deep emotional grief strongly, clearly survives. A tiny bird pausing to drop grass shows incredible, massive emotional depth. A huge elephant touching ancient ivory reveals profound, complex memory and sorrow. A grieving mother chimp clutching her dead infant perfectly demonstrates absolute heartbreak. This overwhelming psychological burden connects every single breathing animal perfectly, completely today. Nature is absolutely not just a violently cold, rigidly calculating biological machine. It is incredibly beautifully filled with quiet moments of deeply profound mourning.